2022. Should I start again, Wendy? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the council meeting of the 18th of October 2022. I'd like to declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. and start by acknowledging that we are meeting today on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay respects to elders past and present. In terms of apologies or members on leave of absence, we do have Councillor Ross Iapolo on approved leave from the 3rd of October to the 3rd of November 22, and Councillor Jonathan Hallett is an apology this evening due to being unwell. Sorry to hear that, Jonathan. Wish you all the best if you're listening. I'm sure that if you're unwell, you may not be listening to a council meeting though, but we certainly wish him well. So I'll go straight to public question time and receiving of public statements. Welcome members of the public gallery. Lovely to see you here this evening. For those who may not have been to a council meeting before, this is a time where you might like to come forward to the microphone and make a statement. We just ask that you state your name, the suburb in which you reside, and the item that you're speaking to this evening. So I'll open public question time.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Connor Porter-Wilkinson from Element, and I'll be providing a brief overview in support of agenda item number 9.2 relating to the change of use and amendment to approved number of workstation bays at 496 Charles Street, North Perth, which is the Eco Spray car wash site. Following on from my deputation last week at the council briefing, I would like to provide a brief update on the application, which has had some minor amendments to address some of the previous concerns raised by the community and council. A primary concern raised in relation to whether the proposed works will result in a greater processing of vehicles on site. In this regard, we note that the car wash will continue to service the same number of clients, this being 25 on weekdays and 20 on the weekend. The reason for this being that the purpose of the proposal is not to increase the serving capacity of the site, and instead will allow for more effective staffing of the site, so that will stop doubling up of staff members on any cars. Regarding an air compressor, the current operator has undertaken the installment of an acoustic shield around the air compressor previously, which has already been inspected by city health officers. It's also noted that the air compressor in its current location and operating patterns have been assessed by an acoustic consultant with the report findings that the air compressor is compliant with the relevant restrictions at all times. I also want to address that the business no longer parks vehicles on the side streets or adjoining properties. It is acknowledged that this was previously undertaken. However, it does not occur now and will not occur into the future. We have closely worked with the city in this regard and have developed an updated noise and operational management plan, which now includes a section detailing how all vehicles will remain on site. We appreciate that the neighbours do have concerns regarding the proposal. However, we note that the concerns raised primarily relate to past compliance matters, which we believe the current proposal will address alongside the appropriate conditions. Once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Connor. Next speaker, please. No further speakers. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy the meeting. We will go to that item first, and then we can also deal with the items that members of the public gallery are here for this evening. So can you just tell me what number you're here for? 5.3. So that'd be 9.3 this evening. Yep. And doggy daycare, 9.1. Yep. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So I'll close public question time, just noting that we haven't received any written questions or statements for this evening, and that in our agenda we do have response to previous public questions taken on notice. So I'll move to item 4, applications for leave of absence. Councillors, any requests for leave? Okay, no requests. So we'll move to item 5, receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. I believe we have none this evening. So item 6, confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 20th of September 2022. Can I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Warner. All those in favour? I declare the minutes carried. Announcements by myself. I did just want to announce, whilst it was a couple of weeks ago now, I think we're still basking in the glory of a fantastic waffle grand final in Footyville, which we held on the 1st of October. So worth mentioning, 16,791 people at Leederville Oval, and it was an absolute thrill to see Leederville Oval full and looking like a proper grandstand. And I think it's just really nice to know that within 6 weeks, the City of Vincent played a major part in helping the Football Commission prepare for that grand final. Footyville in the streets of Leederville was the first time we've had a full street closure and festival happening, and it felt fantastic to be doing that again. So that was really great to see as well. And a lot of positive feedback has come to the city. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of the team at the City of Vincent for getting the job done in a very short space of time. The turf was looking absolutely stunning. And also thank you to council for supporting the bid for hosting the Waffle Grand Final. It has kickstarted a bit of an event season for us, and there's more events coming. We're about to launch our summer events guide to let community members know that now that the pandemic is at a manageable level, we're resuming with a lot of our events that have been missed for some time. So it's really great to see events like St. Patrick's Day returning. We'll be celebrating 60 years of Beatty Park in late November, and of course Pride Fair Day, which is one of our most joyful and well-attended events, will be in Hyde Park on the 13th of November. So a series of events will be announced very shortly. I also just wanted to mention that the City of Vincent has recently received a National Local Government Award for our waste management, in the waste management category for FOGO. This has been a really great boost, I think, for our waste team and for council on this one. So just wanted to say again, a huge thank you to our dedicated waste team. It is an incredible achievement. I think that the reason the city was chosen because they love our ambitious target of zero waste to landfill by 2028, and they're really impressed with the way that our rollout of FOGO has gone. And it is a huge kudos to our community that we've had some really low levels of contamination. And just I think it was late last week, I was able to give some bin tagging awards to a couple of our residents who had a great deal of pride in really going on that waste sorting journey. And when they first received a not so happy face on their bin, they rose to the challenge, and now they are absolute champions for waste sorting in Vincent. So congratulations, City of Vincent and our waste team in particular, for what has been an incredibly intensive program of waste reform over the past year. Moving on then to declarations of interest, CEO.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I noted a personal impartiality interest in relation to item 5.5, local planning scheme amendment number 11.
9.5.
9.5,
Yeah.
sorry, that's from the briefing. Local planning scheme amendment number 11, noting that I was involved in the initial discussions with Royal Perth Hospital in my former role at the Department of Planning. Mayor Cole, you declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 9.1 on the proposed change of use to unlisted use doggy daycare, noting that your dog attends the daycare centre and has made use of daycare, grooming and home care services available to all customers. That's all received for tonight.
Thank you, CEO. Councillors, are there any last minute declarations? Okay. All right. So tonight from the public gallery, we have had item 9.2 raised, and we also have people here in relation to 9.1 and 9.3. That doesn't mean that they have to be called out. They're just here to see what happens. So I'll go around the room and see if there are other items that council members wish to bring forward for debate. Councillor Castle, any items to add?
9.8, please.
9.8. Councillor Wallace. Councillor Warner.
9.9.
9.9. Thank you. Councillor Loden. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Gondaszewski. Nothing. Okay. just to mention, because we do have a big one on tonight, which hasn't been called out, which is the redevelopment proposals for the Avenue and Frame Court car park. So I might just mention that we have had a briefing on that last night, which I think has been incredibly helpful. So I'm happy also not to call that one out unless anyone else does, but just to explain there has been a lot more information provided to council in relation to that, which was very much appreciated. Thank you, Director. Okay, if that's all the items that we're calling forward, I'll just confer with the CEO. I think we have a record. We have got 3 items to debate this evening. It's unheard of. I just want to say this is a historic moment in the City of Vincent Council that we are only debating 3 items at a council meeting. So well briefed we are. So those items are item 9.2, 9.8 and 9.9. So the remainder of the items will be moved en bloc. So I probably don't know if I can just do that by exclusion. So every other item other than 9.2, 9.8 and 9.9 are being moved en bloc. Can I please have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Wallace. All those in favour? I declare the en bloc items carried. So that means for item 9.1, congratulations Doggy Daycare, you now have a permanent approval. And for 9.3, amendment to local planning scheme number 2, amendment 9 has passed as well. Thank you. All right, so we will then go to item 9.2, which is 496 Charles Street, North Perth. Change of use to unlisted use car wash and detailing. This is an amendment to an approved number of working station bays. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Loden. And just to note, there has been some late advice that has just come through at 5:45 p.m. Should be printed in front of you. So it might help if we go to the director to just walk through some of that, given that it's happened quite late. Councillor Gontaszewski.
I'm happy to hear from the Executive Director and then I can speak later if required.
Executive Director, could you just walk us through some of the questions that have been put and some of the responses here from the applicant, given that it's just been received? If you could quickly summarise, that would be helpful.
Yes, through Mayor Cole. So we met with some of the residents this morning who raised a number of queries. I'll go through those one by one. So one of the main query was whether this proposal was actually if it was creating efficiencies for the business, then it would create additional vehicles, and how that they were questioning how that could be possible. Additional vehicles couldn't be being brought to the site while efficiencies were being made. The applicant's response to that was that at the moment, the site can't achieve those levels of the 20 to 25 vehicles a day that was assumed originally for the proposal, because the site they're constrained with how they can wash the car. So they can wash the car in the one bay in the shed. The other bay that's next to it is where the touch up, the finishes occur, so the vacuuming, etc. And at the moment, the staff are getting in each other's way in that small space, and so they can't get through those number of vehicles. So this proposal is to allow for an extra 3 bays to be used for the vacuuming, which takes more time than the washing, and so would allow them to get through those vehicles, those originally proposed amount of vehicles in one day. There was a question around the vehicle movements onto the site, and the number of vehicle movements mentioned throughout the report was 50 and 40 on a weekend. The residents were concerned that that would mean there would be 40 to 50 vehicles being washed per day, but the applicant has advised that the numbers included in the report relate to vehicle movements. So onto the site and then off of the site is 2. So that would still be 20 to 25 vehicles per day moving onto the site, so including the staff movements. There were a number of questions about the air compressor, the vacuum unit, and the high pressure hose. A bit of confusion around that. So the applicants provided some clarity around the air compressor, its location. They've advised the location hasn't changed. The neighbours were raised the point that the air compressor, in their view, had been located somewhere else previously and had resulted in less noise. And then it had been located within the shed where the washing occurs, and the noise had increased. And the neighbours also verified that the city had gone on site, done some noise measurements, required the operator to put the compressor inside of a box that was shielding the noise, and that the noise had then complied with the noise regulations. So the applicants come back and advise that the air compressor hasn't changed, its location hasn't changed, it'll stay where it is in the box. And the city's confirmed that that complies with the noise regulations. The vacuum units, at the moment, there's 2 vacuum units. One of them is in the building where the toilets are, and it's a hose comes out of that building. So the actual vacuum unit is inside the building and the noise is restricted because of its location. But they have a second vacuum unit, which they bring out outside when they're cleaning vehicles outside. So under this proposal, that vacuum unit would be removed, and a second vacuum unit would be housed inside the toilet structure and hosed out. So they wouldn't be bringing the vacuum unit outside anymore. And so the noise would reduce as a result of that. And then the last question was from the neighbours, was around the assumption that the high pressure hose would only be used 10% of the time. The neighbours' view was that the high pressure hose was being used more often than that, was being used all day. The applicant's response was that this relates to the sound generated from the tip of the water hose. And so my reading of that is that they're comfortable with their assumption that the high pressure hose will be used. The noise from the high pressure hose will occur no more than 10% of the time. The city's not verified that. We haven't monitored the site all day and measured how long the high pressure hose is being used historically, but that's the assumption that's been included in previous reports. The number of wash bays isn't changing, and so administration was comfortable that that assumption was reasonable.
Thank you, Mayor Cole, and thank you for that information, Executive Director. I'm really pleased that administration has been able to hear from affected or impacted residents, and that we've received these responses from the applicant. Overall, I'm supportive of this application. I do think that whilst we need to ensure that if issues are raised that may indicate potential compliance, that the city is able to take action to investigate and I guess enforce compliance if required. I do think that my reading of it is that I accept that the additional bays will assist with efficiencies on the site, and that there are sufficient controls in relation to acoustics and also the relocation of the unit, and even things like, having line marking and directional signage on site to improve the flow of the vehicles on site. So overall, I think that this development is can be approved, and there's a whole raft of conditions there that will need to be monitored, or that would need to be complied with. And if that's the case, then I think that this is that this change will hopefully lead to a business that is able to have a reduced impact on the surrounding residents, whilst also improving efficiency for the business owners.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm similarly happy to support the officer recommendation on this. I guess that the challenges, as Councillor Gontaszewski outlined, is around the noise. So it's great that engagement has occurred, and I guess I'd encourage the applicant to continue to keep best control over the noise that they're making, because that is going to be the touch point where there's going to be challenges with this going forward. Thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just ask a couple of questions. There was a bit of chat last week about a vacancy sign. Could just get a quick summary of what happened there.
Yeah, sure. So the applicant, through you, Mayor Cole, was concerned about that no vacancy sign. They didn't feel it was going to achieve the outcome. So we discussed the issue that the no vacancy sign was trying to address, which was when all of those bays are full on site and someone's driving past and wants to get their car washed, they don't end up filling the site with other vehicles and having nowhere to park. The applicant advised that there's still plenty of room for those vehicles to enter and then exit the site without having to go into those bays, and that their view was that the management practice that they would take would be to advise anyone that comes on the site when all the bays are filled to come back at another time. So they schedule a time, they go off and they come back and get their car washed. So they updated the applicant updated the management plan to include that procedure, and the conditions require compliance with that management plan. Administration was comfortable that that was a superior approach to putting a no vacancy sign up that may not be effective in any case.
Thanks. And just another question about the hose use. It seems like a key assumption of the noise assessment was that it was restricted to around 10% of the time of the hours of operation. There doesn't seem to be any controls in the noise and operational management plan that dictate that it is actually limited to that time. So I guess what would happen if it was found that they were using the hose 40% of the time, for example?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. That's an interesting question. So there would potentially be the ability for the city to enforce compliance through the planning approval by saying that the development doesn't comply with the noise management plan and the acoustic assessment that was conditioned. It would probably be, if it was that clear cut and we'd measured clearly more than 10%, so 40% during a day, then we would probably use the planning approval to address that issue. If it was, say, 15%, or it averaged out to 10% over a week or something, then we would use the noise regulation assessment to determine whether it was suitable or not. So both the health and the compliance officers would address a complaint around that issue, and we would just decide which was the most appropriate piece of legislation to use if we needed to use a stick to enforce compliance and ensure compliance.
Okay.
I mean, the most likely thing is we would say to the applicant, at the operator, you're operating more than 10% of the time with the air hose, stop doing that, fix it. And in most cases that would happen. And if it didn't, then we'd have to decide which piece of legislation we use to pursue compliance further.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to support as well. Thank you.
Can I just ask a further question to that? If council was of a view that they wanted to add that as a condition under the acoustic report part 4, would that be acceptable, given that it forms one of the assumptions of the acoustic report, just to tighten that up?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we haven't recommended that because it is in the acoustic report, but also because it's a difficult thing for administration to measure. It's much easier for us to measure the noise generated through the noise regulations by putting noise monitoring devices on the adjoining site. That's where the concerns have been raised. That won't determine whether the air hose is being used or another piece of machinery or yelling or something is causing the noise. So when we haven't proposed using that 10% as a condition, because it's difficult to enforce and it probably gives the incorrect view to the neighbours that we're going to easily be able to enforce that 10% requirement. It's not that we can't, it's just that it's probably not the best mechanism for ensuring compliance on the site. I mean, if it's clearly being used all the time, it's easy. You know, if it's 40% of the time, we could determine that, but it's very hard to, if they're out there measuring and it goes to 11%, I wouldn't want to give the assumption or make people believe that we could deal with that easily. We would use the noise regulations in that case, as I mentioned earlier.
Thanks, Director. Councillors, I'm happy to speak to this because I have met with some of the neighbours today and I have had previous involvement in this over the past. Was on council for the 2019 amendment to the original approval, which was made before my time on council. Look, I absolutely understand the differentiation between compliance and a fresh planning application or an amendment to a planning application. And I did speak with the residents today about how sometimes a amended planning application is an opportunity to revisit conditions, that there's stronger conditions that are being proposed as part of this application. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that this has had an impact on the amenity of the neighbours, and they still feel that there are ongoing issues that beyond any form of compliance action that's happened, they're still talking about the fact that they see that there's parking in side streets in the adjoining laneway, that they are very sceptical about this idea of 25 vehicles per day. And it is interesting to me that I do wonder about the business model, again, not a planning matter, but 25 vehicles per day with up to 5 staff. There are some assumptions here which I do find interesting. I did want to ask about the 10%, because that's, we've just been discussing it, but this assumption in the acoustic report, 10% air hose to service 4 external bays. We did, Director, talk earlier about whether the acoustic report actually talked about what sort of noise would be emitted. It talks about the fact that the vacuums will be piped out and that it will be contained inside, but it doesn't appear that the acoustic report has actually gone to any noise being emitted by that. I'm not sure whether that's on the basis of it being within an enclosed building or whether that's something that needs to be explored. Director, question?
So through you, Mayor Cole, the 10% relates to the water hose, so the high pressure hose,
So this is in the wash down,
which is inside the building, inside that shed.
So 10% for the air hose for the wash down, but no percentage on the vacuum hoses.
Yeah, that's correct. So there wasn't an assumption that those vacuums would only be used for a particular percentage of the day. There were assumptions around how many vehicles, and they made an assumption about how many minutes the vacuums would be on for while servicing those vehicles.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 25 vehicles a day with how many minutes per vehicle?
Yeah, 20 vehicles per day. I can't recall the number of minutes, I'm sorry.
But is the argument from the acoustic perspective that noise will be minimal because the vacuum unit is going to be housed internally?
That's correct. So one of the vacuum units is already housed internally, and they already have the number of minutes per vehicle that the vacuum is used for. So they use those real life experiences to determine the assumptions. And then because the vacuum cleaner that is currently brought outside, it will be piped inside. They've assumed the same level of noise to that vacuum cleaner as well.
So look, it is a difficult one. I mean, as I say, like I would have liked to have a bit more information about the assumptions on the use of the vacuum and what the sound attenuation versus it being internal versus external. One of the things that I am concerned about is the car parking, and condition 1.2 does talk about all activities associated with the use being contained wholly within the lots. But I wondered whether it would be worthwhile council considering adding the words all activities including car parking, given that that's the undertaking that's being made by the applicant's representative this evening. As you know, I can't move amendments, so I'll put that out there for your consideration. But I do think that it is an approved use, which I think is the difficulty. When you talk to the neighbours, they'll say that it is already operating at beyond its existing approval. Obviously, the city hasn't fact checked that in the last 6 to 12 months, where the compliance action has not been undertaken, but they continue to hold concerns about parking in streets and more cars coming through. One of the positives, I think, of this this potential development approval, if it goes ahead, is that it does provide some pretty stringent conditions. I would personally also like to see something around the use of the air hose. I know it's difficult to say to put a 10% on that, but I think it is. Are you saying, Director, that because it is tied to the acoustic report, there is still the ability for the city to undertake compliance action if you are starting to see that use of that air hose extending well beyond 10%, but just that putting 10% exactly as a condition would be difficult to monitor?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Yeah, well, look, I mean, for me, this one is complicated, and I think that when we consider our new scheme and this use, which is now a use in TPS LPS 2, that we will need to consider how car washes work with sensitive uses, particularly residential to the rear, because one of the neighbours has raised that they think there should be buffer zones. We don't have that consideration at the moment, so it's difficult to put something in that's not considered. But I think that in future, and noting that administration did recommend the original application back in 2011 for refusal, it is certainly something that I see as a bit of a tension, and I don't know that it's been fully resolved. It's hard to explain to residents that you do see a further development application may actually help tighten things up, when I think that they are, living with it. So I can see the benefit there, but I think in some ways, some of the assumptions I think are still quite questionable for me. So I put to council, if you're prepared to consider potentially an amendment to 1.2 to include car parking, that may also assist if there does need to be further monitoring into the future. Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Gontaszewski.
I'm happy to ask a question around the condition 1.2 in terms of car parking. So Mayor Cole has just made a suggestion for a potential amendment to 1.2 in relation to providing this clarification that all activities associated with the use shall be contained wholly, including car parking, shall be wholly contained within the lots. I'm just trying to think around what the, off the top of my head, I can't recall, what the situation is in relation to parking restrictions on surrounding streets, and I guess if the city includes other businesses. I know there was, I think, Ellesmere and Mount Hawthorn, where the city has encountered concerns from residents in relation to businesses parking their vehicles on private or on public streets, as to the capacity of the city to enforce such a condition, and if this sort of condition is applied elsewhere, or if car parking on business site is generally dealt with through things like cash in lieu or other planning mechanisms.
Through Mayor Cole, the ability to condition that all client parking, if you like, or all vehicles that are being serviced needs to be parked on site, I think probably sits squarely with the planning approval, with the development approval. That was certainly the intent of this condition. So we received objections and submissions around this operator parking a number of vehicles they were looking to wash up and down the laneway and in other streets, and not people coming to the site looking to get their car washed, being told to come back in 5 minutes, parking across the street, having a coffee in their car and then jumping back across when their time came up. That's perfectly appropriate. It's where the actual operator is bringing 10 cars to the site to wash them, parking half of those cars somewhere else, and then bringing them in one by one. That's extending the commercial use outside of the boundary of the site. I've got no objection to that being clarified in the condition as has been mentioned in the debate. And I think it's completely appropriate for the development approval to do that. We wouldn't be able to control that through any other mechanism.
Excellent, thank you. Then I'm happy to move an amendment to 1.2 to put a comma after the word use and then the words including all car parking and then another comma. Yes.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by councillor Warner. Wish to speak to it, councillor Warner? Does anyone wish to speak to the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare that carried. We're back to the substantive. Is there any further discussion or amendments? Councillor Gonchevsky.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I guess in relation to the Mayor's question in relation to the 10% in the noise acoustic report assumption. I'm actually trying to think where that would go if council was of a view to move an amendment to have a belt and braces approach in relation to the amount of use that would be considered appropriate for the, I think it was they were saying the tip of the water hose. Where would that be an amendment to item 3? Would it be a 3.3 to say that
Could I make a suggestion?
yeah, that would be great, thank you.
It could potentially be item 4.2, and it could potentially say something like all vacuum units and air compressors used on the property must be located inside the building on the property and in the location shown on the plan attached to the report and in accordance with the assumptions made in the acoustic report. Would that work, Director?
Yes, that would work through you, Mayor Cole. Probably worth just also adding that they'd need to operate in accordance with the assumptions made in the acoustic report.
That's
Yes.
what I just said.
Yes, were they
Yeah.
your exact words? Perfect.
I'm happy to move those as an amendment to item 4.2.
We have an amendment to 4.2 to add the words and in accordance with the assumptions in the acoustic report. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by councillor Castle. Any debate?
Just to say that I think that whilst I do acknowledge the Executive Director's comments in relation to compliance and enforcement, I think what this can be is that it needs to be very clear to the applicant that the assumptions that were in that acoustic report will form the basis. The city has a number of compliance and monitoring options available to it and to pursue compliance and enforcement action, but I think it's reasonable to be clear as to what the grounds would be in relation to excessive use of noisy units.
Any further comments? Any further comments, councillors? I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare the amendment carried. Is there any further debate? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it carried. Just noting I voted against. Okay, thank you. We'll move to item 9.8, Mount Hawthorn Youth Skate Space Replacement Report. Moved by councillor Castle, seconded by councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very briefly, I just wanted to pull this out to thank administration and to note the progress of this particular project, close to my heart, something that we've been talking about on council and before my time on council for a long time. So it's really encouraging to see this progress to the next level and very encouraging to see the level of support in the community. So thank you to how this has been managed and the consultation, and obviously noting thanks to the local member for the commitment to funding, without which this might have taken somewhat longer. So really just, yep, keen to see it progress as quickly as possible.
And thank you, Chair of this SCATE working group, for all of your efforts. It was seconded by Councillor Wallace. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Wallace?
No, I'll just say I'm excited for it as well. I can't skate personally, but I did ask everyone that I know that does skate and they all love the design. So hopefully we get some good feedback and it gets implemented.
Excellent. Anyone else wish to speak? Oh yeah, like CEO says, it's never too late to learn, but maybe don't come burning it up on your e-scooter.
Yeah, I think there's a certain bone density past which it's not responsible, and that comes with age, but you know.
Oh, look, I would agree. I think there's a lot of excitement in the community. So it's spread through Mount Hawthorn Primary School because my son's come back asking me questions about it. And I think that when we heard from Matt from Skate Sculpture talk about the fact that it's, you know, it's really something that experienced skaters would like to skate. It's something that little kids can skate. They've really done a great job with the design. I think it's really kind of ticked that inclusivity box in terms of making skating accessible for learners and interesting and fun for those that know how to do it. So it's been, yeah, it's really exciting, and it'd be good to put it out there and hopefully get some good feedback. We did take our elders out to Britannia and have a chat with them about it, and they also quite liked the idea of the ochre colouring and the natural aesthetic. So that was also really nice to have that discussion. Yeah, as you say, Alex, Councillor Castle, it's really exciting to see this project underway, and I'm hoping that we can stick with that deadline of construction in January, because now that it's out there, many children and skaters are asking how long. So great project, and thank you to our local member John Carey for the election commitment, $200,000, $30,000 from the City of Vincent. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried. So our last item for the evening is item 9.9, appointment of community representatives to the Arts Advisory Group. Councillor Warner, do you wish to move this item?
Yes.
And seconded by Councillor Castle.
I just wanted to express my thanks to the people who have submitted, put in their names and nominated to be a part of the Arts Advisory Board, and I welcome them aboard, and I can't wait to get to know them and see what we can do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warner. Councillor Castle. Just to add to that, it has been a great response. Like, I'm really pleased to see that we have had so many people put their name forward, and it's a real pleasure to be able to accept each and every one of them onto the Arts Committee. So I hope that that breathes new life and vitality into the group, and I'm sure much will come from that. So thank you to Councillor Warner and Councillor Castle for being our reps on that group. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the item carried. So that concludes all of our business for this evening with the record time. Just going to check for the record. 9 years, never before have I been at a council meeting that is concluded at 6:43 p.m. So thank you all for your time, and we wish Councillor Hallett well, and hope that Councillor Uplow is having a wonderful holiday, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.